Hi, good morning, welcome. My name is Shelley Bookbinder, and this training is for foundational community support staff supervisors, and it's on individualized service plan services and documentation. It's the third of 3 trainings that have been provided over the last 3 Mondays. I'm going to be presenting this information with my colleague Francine Bates. We are both at the Rutgers School of Health Professions, Department of Psychiatric Rehabilitation and Counseling Professions. We've been contracted by the Washington State Healthcare Authority to provide these trainings. So we're in New Jersey. So a few basics about this training. In terms of audio and visual, this is a meeting, not a webinar, to allow more interaction, but everyone's muted upon entry, and we ask that you stay muted unless there's a question or something that you think unmuting would be helpful to use to ask. You can also connect to audio. You can do that on your computer Zoom, or if you're having difficulty with that, I'm going to put the call-in information there if you need to call in for audio. You can also choose to have your video on or off. It can be nice to see each other. I enjoy seeing other people's faces. So if you feel comfortable with that, please be welcome to share video. Just if you do, make sure that your clothing, your background are appropriate. And we do reserve the right to mute audio or video. Sometimes we mute audio just because of background noise. We're trying to keep that down for the recording and also for people to be able to pay attention and hear everything. To ask or respond to a question, we ask that you use the chat. There have been a couple people that have unmuted themselves for questions. That's also okay. But again, when you're done, just we ask that you mute yourself. And again, this webinar is being recorded. The recording and presentation will be sent out by the Healthcare Authority of Washington State. They've been doing it within the week of the trainings being done. So does anyone have any questions before we move on just about the training, the logistics? You can put those into the chat. Okay, so as a reminder, very briefly, this is the third of 3 trainings that have happened the past for 3 consecutive Mondays from 9:30 to 11:30. The first one was on an overview of the golden thread. That's the Medicaid requirement that links assessment, planning, and documentation. And we talked about the 2-part assessment process in foundational community support, starting with the uniform assessment through a more comprehensive assessment. And then last Monday, my colleague Emily went over the components of the individualized service plan and also a tool to help develop goals and break down goals into steps or objectives using knowledge, skills, and resources. And then today, we're going to talk about individualized service plan services, so the services that are being provided and then how to document them in terms of progress notes. So today will be broken into services and documenting the services. Before we get started, we just wanted to reintroduce ourselves for me and then for Francine to introduce herself. So I'll turn things over to Francine.
Hi, my name's Francine Bates, and I'm a colleague with Shelley and Emily, who has been presenting some of these Washington trainings. We all work within the Department of Psychiatric Rehabilitation at Rutgers University, but we work in different, I'm going to call units. Their specialty is housing. My specialty is employment, and I've been providing employment services. Gosh, I'm almost a little embarrassed to say almost 30 years, with over 20 of those being providing services or educating on employment services for individuals with psychiatric disabilities. So I'm thrilled to be here and to be part of this training. And I'm going to hand it back to Emily, and I'll talk to you a little bit later.
Francine. And it is wonderful to have Francine on these trainings because of her employment focus, because Emily and I are both housing focused, even though I have some past experience with providing training and employment services. So again, my name is Shelley Bookbinder, and I'm an education training specialist at the Rutgers School of Health Professions, Psychiatric Rehabilitation for about a year and a half. Prior to that, I worked in New York City as a social worker in areas of domestic violence, housing, community education and programs, and also medical social work. And I've been teaching a number of classes in social work, urban studies. And as Francine mentioned, I work on providing training and technical assistance for a fee-for-service Medicaid program, very similar to foundational community supports. And that's why we were contracted by Washington State specifically, and Francine is graciously helping us with some of the training and adding some of her employment experience and resources. So that's a little bit about us. I wanted to do a review from last week, just to kind of bring things back as you might do, or a clinician or direct care staff might be doing an FCS in terms of reviewing homework. So last week, as I mentioned, Emily talked about goal development and breaking goals down into steps or objectives. And so she talked about the KSR form, or knowledge, skills, and resource form or practice. I'm going to put that form back in the chat. This is in a link that you can open, that you can download. It was shared last week. And this again is how you take a goal and think about what knowledge, skills, and resources are needed to meet that goal. And then what knowledge, skills, and resources the person has, those are strengths. And then what knowledge, skills, and resources are needed to achieve that goal. And that's what the person is going to work on and what steps the person needs to take to reach that goal. So I just wanted to check in. Did anybody use the form? Did anybody share the form with staff? Take more of a look? And if so, was it helpful? Was there anything challenging or concerning about using the form? So I'm going to give folks just a moment to take a look at the form again, and then also, if you want, in the chat to share maybe what went well, what was challenging. If you didn't share the form, and there was a reason you didn't, you can also share that. So just getting a sense of, is this a useful resource for you and staff? So take a moment. And what I'm also going to do, actually, while I wait for people to type, is to do a poll about the KSR form, which asks, would you or your staff use the KSR form in providing FCS services? So supported employment or supportive housing. And for those of you who say yes, did you get an opportunity to do it this week? And those of you who are unsure, what are you unsure about? Is there something specifically about the form that you're unsure about, or that you feel you would need more support on? So take a moment to respond to that question. I'm going to keep this open for about 15 more seconds if anybody else wants to respond, and also looking if somebody would like to share something in the chat. Also, if you just have any questions looking at the form, maybe if this, you're taking a look at it now and you have any questions about it, also happy to answer those. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of people are unsure about using the form. And so if somebody would like to share what they're unsure about with the form, or if they're thinking about, yes, something they would like, if one person could share, that would be wonderful. I'm going to end polling now. So yeah, so of the people who responded, most of you said you were unsure about using the form, which is good to know. I think we're going to talk about ambivalence today. But I think, okay, so Amber, you could use the form, you just looked at it. Yeah, I think that this, again, it doesn't have to be the form. This could just be a discussion, right? The idea of having someone break down what they think and supporting them to break down what they think is needed to achieve a goal, and then thinking about, right, is it knowledge, skills, or resources, and do they have it? Do they know it? Do they know how to do it? Those are helpful things. The form can be a tool, but this could also be a guide for staff to just have a conversation. So thanks for bringing that up, Amber. Karen, you don't use the form, but we already use a lot of these questions. Wonderful, in your vocational assessment. So I'm not sure if we would start using the form. Well, Karen, that's wonderful to hear that you're breaking things down in this way. And some agencies absolutely have things broken down, but other agencies don't. So it depends on the type of service you provide, the way those services are provided. So if you're already doing something comparable, it's absolutely not necessary. This is just an offering for folks who need it. So it's wonderful to know that your agency already has this integrated into your vocational assessment. Wonderful. So if anybody else would like to share, we can continue to have that there. We also, last week, Emily talked about a new supervision strategy. She shared a template for a collaborative agenda, an outline of this idea of praise, polish, praise, right, of giving feedback in terms of something that you liked, something maybe the person could work on, and then more praise. And I know when I'm doing feedback to students, to other people, I always use this in terms of starting with something that worked well, something that I liked, and something very specific that I like, not just like, oh, you did a good job, but what is it actually that stood out to me that's a strength that the person has, which is what's done with clients as well. So starting with strengths and then thinking about where they can kind of build and improve. So I'm going to reshare the collaborative agenda here for anybody who didn't see it. And again, this is a resource to help direct staff when you're working with them to help come up with items to go on the agenda so that they're contributing. So the agenda is not just driven by management needs, directors needs, supervisors needs, but the fact is supervision is collaborative. You're getting something out of it. You're learning about what staff are doing. You're helping to enhance skills and processing, but they're also getting something from it, right? And so making sure that their pieces of the agenda are being covered. So having that collaboration in terms of planning, just like the ISP is a collaborative document, the assessment is a collaborative document, right? So thinking about collaboration, not just with clients, but also with other staff. So that is a bit of a review from what was done last week. Again, if anybody would like to share, please put it in the chat. I'll continue to monitor that. But so what we're going to do today is building a little bit on this, since the ISP is talking about services. We are going to talk about specifically types of SCS services, how to provide them, and then how to document them in progress notes. So I'm realizing now these polls are very close together, but I'm going to launch another poll to ask about your role in services and progress notes. So do you provide foundational community support services listed on individual service plans? Yes. No, I don't provide them, but I supervise staff who do, or no, I don't provide them. And then do you write progress notes? You write progress notes, you don't write progress notes, you don't write progress notes, but you supervise staff who do, or not applicable. So take a moment to fill this out. This helps Francine and I get a sense of who's on the Zoom, in the training, and also helps us kind of gauge what might be helpful to focus on. Since while the training's already done, we can choose to focus on different things. So take another moment. We have about half of the people who have done the poll, so I'm just going to close it in about 10 seconds if anybody else would like to complete the poll. I know some of you are calling in, so you can't necessarily complete the poll. Okay, so just another moment and I'm going to close it. Okay, so wonderful. The majority of you provide some degree of foundational community support services. About a third of the people who responded say you don't, but you supervise staff who do. And then one of you says that you don't provide services or supervise staff. Wonderful. And your relationship to progress notes, again, about the majority of you who responded said you write progress notes, and about a third said you don't, but you supervise staff who do. Wonderful. So we have some people providing services and some people not providing services but supervise staff, and one person who says you're not doing either. If you want to share what you're doing for the person who said neither, that would be helpful. Maybe in the chat, you can do it directly to me or to me, or if you want to share with everybody, that would be helpful. Wonderful, great to know. Welcome to everyone. I hope this training will be helpful to everyone, regardless of whether you're supervising staff or providing the services yourself. Cindy, right, sorry you're having computer issues. Okay. That's absolutely fine. Again, the call-in information is there if you're having computer issues, and it might be good to call in. That might be easier. So, Wonderful. So the learning objectives for today, we're going to start by defining intentional service delivery. What are intentional services? Medicaid really likes to focus on intentional services. What does that actually mean? Then I'm going to talk about some strategies to provide those services and methods of delivering services. Those two tie in together, and then discuss and apply progress note format. So how to actually write progress notes, which is outlined in the Medicaid regulations for foundational community supports. So Francine's going to focus on progress notes and a specific recommended format with some examples, and also some tools for checklists and auditing progress notes and things like that. Okay, does anyone have any questions before we move forward? Again, anything in the chat? I do have it open, so I'm monitoring if you ask any questions or have any comments. So foundational community support services in the golden thread. So the golden thread is that threading from engagement to assessment all the way through to documentation, and how somebody, especially a Medicaid auditor, can look at the ISP, the individualized service plan, or the assessment and see how it links all the way through services, right? So the medical necessity and the assessment and the uniform assessment ties all the way through to the services that are provided and documented. So we've been using this in all the trainings, this graphic. And right now for services, we're going to focus on the individualized service plan and in providing intentional services. So the reason we're going to focus on these two is because the services need to be written on the service plan and planned, and then actually provided by staff and by some of you. So intentional service delivery. This is language that comes from Medicaid and from Medicaid regulations. It's from Medicaid. Medicaid is, while it's state implemented, it's a federal program with state partnerships. We use intentional service delivery in New Jersey. It really does come from Medicaid, and so it's going from, in the first supervision training, I talked about the shift from case management to rehabilitative services, and how foundational community supports, other Medicaid programs like our fee-for-service program in New Jersey are focused on goal-driven rehabilitation. In the past, supportive housing models, more case management models were focused on responding to needs of people, right? So it wasn't that there was necessarily a goal, but the goal was to keep somebody housed, to keep somebody with benefits, and not really driven by consumer goals beyond that necessarily. And so this shift to goal-driven rehabilitation makes services intentional, which means that intentional services are purposeful, right? They're related back to consumer goals, right? So if somebody has a goal, for example, to go to 2 interviews, right? To find a job in 6 months, let's say a part-time job in 6 months, right? So thinking about how services will help somebody to meet that goal. And so the services provided are specifically and purposefully goal-directed. They're also deliberate. And by deliberate, that means that they're using a very specific way to actually provide those services, right? And so we're going to talk about some evidence-based practices today and Medicaid regulations, not just for foundational community supports, but for a lot of these fee-for-service programs, does highlight evidence-based practices with the idea that there are certain methods that can be adapted, that can be changed, but that there is evidence that supports their efficacy, and that they're using them under certain circumstances are beneficial to populations. So these services are deliberate, they're provided in a specific way, and that they're planned. They're on individualized service plans, right? So whether it's 3 months of planning or 6 months of planning, there's a guideline which can be adapted and changed to a degree as needed. And as you see the person's capabilities, what their needs are more kind of specifically, but it is planned, right, within months, whether that be 6 months, 3 months, 9 months. And so, right, you have services, it's not ad hoc, but there is a plan with deliberate services done in a specific way for certain outcomes that are written on ISPs. So most FCS services should be on an ISP. However, crisis services not identified on the ISP can be provided. This is the same thing that we see here in New Jersey, that crisis services, let's say somebody's at the threat of eviction, the threat of having a service turned off, let's say electricity, phone, internet, something like that. However, if those services become habitual, so let's say, there's a threat of eviction once or twice, then those are crisis services. But if every 2 months there's a threat of eviction, then there needs to be some service that's provided to help somebody not get to that point of crisis. So it might be budgeting, a budgeting goal or a goal of saving a certain amount of money. And so thinking about how crises that are habitual kind of stop, can turn into regular services. So that's really important to think about. But yes, crisis services are the exception to the everything needs to be on the ISP. Those get sent in as modifications to the plan after they've been provided. So benefits of intentional services. A benefit is, right, the plan drives service provision. So there is a goal in mind. A lot of times the interventions scaffold on each other, working towards, that objective and eventually that goal. And there is an intended outcome, right? If the services are provided, let's say if, a step towards a goal is saving, $100 a month, or, $25 a month, whatever the amount is, right? If people, if it's working on using a budget, if it's working on trying to increase benefits, whatever it is, then if at the end of the 6 months, you can see, like, was the outcome met? Was the person able to save $25, $50, $100 each month to see if it was effective? So you can go back with the person and see, right, was this effective? Is this helping you to reach your goal? And whether that's, some degree of being able to pay back debt, if it's being able to keep the service on or being able to get a service like internet, something like that, then that can really be motivating. It's less of just following up and checking in on somebody, which again is this more case management, older model of services, which is not goal driven. So now I'm going to turn to, for FCF services, the types of services. So what services being provided and the methods or how services are being provided. So in terms of types of services, you have skill training and resource acquisition. That's a main core piece of foundational community supports, which is why we focus on knowledge and resources for the knowledge, skills, and resource form. So there's, and I'm going to go through a list of these, but for supportive housing, there's pre and post tenancy skills, and for supportive employment, there's job search and job sustaining, right? So the things before getting a job or being housed, and then once somebody is housed or has a job, what will help them sustain that. So those are types of training and resource acquisition, and then methods of acquiring skills and resources. We're going to talk about tell, show, do, and skills training, motivational enhancement, cognitive behavioral techniques, and illness management recovery. I'm going to share some resources for all these things to help you who are providing the services and who are also supervising staff who provide services. So this is what we're going to focus on for the first half of the training. So we're going to start with pre and post tenancy. No, we're going to start with supportive employment services. So this is a list from the Healthcare Authority of Washington State on foundational community supports of pre-employment services and employment sustaining services. This is not an exhaustive list, but these are categories of services. And I want you to take a look and think about what is a common, if you do work in supported employment, what is a common service that your program provides? So taking a look at this, and again, these are categories and they're not exhaustive and they can absolutely be broken down, but what are a service that either for those of you who provide services or who supervise people who do, what's a common supported employment service? Wonderful. Person-centered employment planning. Mhm. So thinking about, right, what are people's strengths, history, goals, thinking about a plan towards getting ready to apply or actually applying, absolutely. So setting up those, that process for working towards application, right? And some people, it might be a lot more kind of basic skills and building blocks, or some people might be updating or making a resume. So person-centered employment planning, what people need. How about one more example? Nobody has, Francine, benefits, education and planning. Yes, absolutely. So focusing, thank you, Francine, from your experience in the field, both as a person providing services and also helping to train people who provide job developers. So benefits, right? So benefits, it could be vocational education and vocational rehab, rehab benefits. It could be benefits through the state and through the state's, job search. They have a lot of labor market information and trainings and basic skills training, resume training. So those type of benefits, right? So that's all kind of pre-employment, but there's again, SSI, SSDI, absolutely. So that's for supported employment. And there's also, once people are employed, job accommodations, more benefits, education and planning, if there are benefits through their job or their job impacts their state benefits in some way. Okay. So for those of you in supportive housing, services listed in foundational community supports, so pre-tenancy, post-tenancy. So what is a common supportive housing service your program provides or that you provide if you or your program provides supportive housing services? So for people before being housed or after being housed. Again, I'll just point out there's benefit support. You pretty much do all of these services. Thank you, Erica. Wonderful. So depending on the person, and I think that's a great point, depending on the person, their situation, right? They might need any number of these services, multiple of these services. And so your agency should be, if you're providing supportive housing, open to providing this, all of these. Thank you, Jessica. Wonderful. Here's more about, is there one that's more common, whether, something like benefit support or financial skills. I know in New Jersey, we have a lot of support around budgeting and savings and kind of building up people's skills to manage finances and to maximize what they have. So Karen, let me see. We do most of these things. One that stands out is helping our clients prepare for meetings with their landlords. Absolutely. So helping people, self-advocacy skills, liaising with landlords. Absolutely. Wonderful. Thank you guys for contributing here. So Marissa, intake assessments, goal and future planning, benefits, food security, interpersonal relationship, maintaining their unit. Absolutely. Christina, most everything. Thank you guys. Yeah, so some of you seem to see certain types of services stand out. A lot of you are like, it depends on the client, lots of different services. So thank you for sharing. I think I saw in the first week that more of you provide supportive housing than supported employment. So wonderful to have both programs represented. So those are types of services. So I just wanted to go over that briefly. So then how are these services provided? So this is the methods of which services or interventions are provided. And I'm going to go through four different kind of types of ways to support providing foundational community support services. The first is the skills teaching template, which is helping supporting staff to provide services to teach skills, whether those be employment skills, housing skills, communication skills with one's landlord, communication with benefits, whether it's how to actually apply, skills to apply, so all different types of skills, motivational enhancement strategies that comes from motivational interviewing, cognitive behavioral techniques, which comes from cognitive behavioral therapy, and illness management and recovery. And I mentioned motivational interviewing and cognitive behavioral therapy. Rehabilitative services are not therapeutic, so these are skill-based applications of CBT and MI. Just to reiterate the non-therapeutic nature of rehabilitative services. So now I'm going to go through each of these four and provide some resources. So the first thing that I want to talk about is the skills teaching template, which I'm going to put in the chat box now. So the skills teaching template is a template that we use for training purposes and share with providers about how to prepare for an outreach. And this template can be a way for staff to prepare before an outreach, to work with somebody, a client, while you're actually meeting with them, to kind of break down steps together, to think about rationale for doing it. This can be done collaboratively with someone, or this can be kept in a resource binder or in charts so that this can be referred back to for consumers who may need similar skills. Again, these won't be universal because they're going to be specific to what the person needs and how things are broken down, but they are something that can be kind of a starting place for thinking about how to provide services. So this template, again, is basically just trying to think about how to standardize and prepare to provide services based on the person. So first, it's based on the tell, show, do teaching method. And this comes from, and it's used widely in teaching, it's used in medical education. And the idea is the way we learn is you have information about a skill, you're shown a skill, and then you try it yourself. And so it's that all three of these are needed in order to acquire new skills. This is also used a lot in early childhood education, but because of the onset of illness, because of high rates of institutionalization, because of high rates of homelessness, a lot of people with serious and persistent mental illnesses have skill deficits, which is why there's such an emphasis on skills training in programs for folks who have been homeless, who have serious and persistent mental illnesses. So I'm going to go through, I put the template in the chat, and if you want to open it, it's also available for you to download. And the link is here, so when you get the PDF, the PowerPoint, you can open it there as well. Everywhere that has a link in here, when you get the PDF sent this week by HCA, you'll be able to click on the resources. So the first piece is the telling, orienting to the skill. So what is the skill that will be taught? What's the rationale for teaching the skill, and how is the skill being taught? And the idea is, right, if it's just like, oh, you need to learn budgeting skills, right? That's not going to necessarily give the person buy-in, right? But why do you need budgeting skills, right? What's the rationale? Is it so that you can save money to make sure you can pay back, money that you owe on a phone bill so that your phone isn't cut off? Is it so that you can work towards, doing something that you want to do, maybe a trip to see a child or a family member by bus, right? And so thinking about what is it, why does the person want a budget? What's the rationale? What will it help them do? And letting the person know how this skill is going to be taught. And then a breakdown of the steps. Again, this is telling. This can be done collaboratively. This can be done by using skills that are broken down by, for example, the CDC. So when I was teaching this material to direct care staff, let's say 2 weeks ago, I used an example of teaching people to wash their hands. And I found a list from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Now that list, I had staff make their own list, and a lot of them had more steps than were on the CDC list, which included things like what type of faucet is being used, what type of soap dispenser, how much detail in terms of lathering, right? And so thinking about what is a list? Maybe you can start with, but add more information based on what you know of the person. Do they need to know about the context the skill is going to be performed in? Might they have questions about, you know, certain things before the skill? Do they need, right, if it's washing your hands, do they need to know about purchasing things? Do they need to know about, you know, having certain things in their bathroom if it's done in their home, right? So thinking about a comprehensive list that's broken down with enough skill that the person feels like they can perform the skill. It's also important to think about having a consistent list of skills. And something that comes up is, right, people do things differently. They also live in environments with different types of resources. You know, some people have soap dispensers, some have bars of soap, and the care for those things is different, right? Some people have paper towels, some people have, right? And washing your hands is done differently in public than at home. So all of those things need to be consistent, because when someone's first learning a skill, consistency is really important so that they can learn the skill, generalize it to different environments. So breaking down the skills, super important. It's also important to think, do you want a written list? Do you want a visual list with pictures? Do you want a video list? If somebody maybe has lower levels of literacy, is the list of the person's, you know, native language is not English? Is there a way to get that list translated into a language that the person feels comfortable reading, even if they can, you know, are comfortable speaking in Spanish, maybe in English, maybe reading it in Spanish would be more helpful, right? Thinking about all those things, about how the list is accessible to them. You know, will you leave them with a copy of the list, all of those things. Then demonstrating the skill. So having the skill demonstrated, and this is showing it. It could be you demonstrating it, or it could be the person seeing it in terms of a video that you share, something like that. But making sure that the demonstration matches the breakdown of skill steps, because it could be very confusing for somebody trying to learn a skill if they're shown a demonstration with different steps or different resources than they have, or that was outlined to them in the breakdown of steps. And then having practice opportunities for the skill. So role plays, real life situations that they can practice the skill in, and then homework, ways that they can practice the skill on their own in between when services are provided. So has anybody used a skills template in the past? Or any way, is there any way that your agency record how skills, you know, steps to skills, that you record what's being taught, or that staff or yourself give to people once they've been taught? Is it a written list, a printed list, sharing videos? So what's actually done? Oh, you haven't, but you love this. Yeah, so thanks, Erica. I think we wanted to give it to you as a Word document, because this is not the end all be all. This is just a start, right? And so thinking about, right, you might have different pieces that you want to add to this or change about this, maybe a different number of steps. All of this is changeable, and it's just a basis for thinking about, right, how can you pre-plan? How can you share this with consumers? Maybe come up with some of the things together, some of the practice opportunities or steps together, and then you can leave it with the consumer, and you can also share it in terms of other staff as a starting place for other consumers. So this is just, again, a start that you can adapt. And today is going to be pretty resource heavy, because we found in the past that with doing the supervisor trainings, just sharing resources for staff is helpful. So anybody else use any type of template or way to communicate? Do you have lists somewhere of skills broken down? We use a social skills training for schizophrenia workbook that we often get lists of steps for, like, interpersonal skills, conversational skills, and that's a great place. Again, as a start for the breakdown of skills. Everybody needs things tailored a little bit based on their knowledge, skills, and resources. Okay, so I'm going to keep monitoring the chat. So that's one resource for skills teaching. And again, that telling, showing, doing, really important. And generally when we're doing trainings, we always give information, show us using the information, give people an opportunity to practice. So just good practice in general. So motivational enhancement strategies. This again comes from motivational interviewing, and it's with the idea, right, that change comes from motivation. A lot of changes that people are thinking about making, they're ambivalent about, right? And any change of behavior, whether it's, you know, smoking less, whether it's drinking less, exercising more, you know, changing nutrition, whatever type of thing it is, applying for a new job, looking for new housing, like any of these things, difficult changes. And there are things that encourage us, motivation we have to make those changes, and things that we're ambivalent and we want to, things that we're just like, oh, it's okay, that sustain us in the behavior. And motivational enhancement is a strategy to help people make those changes. Before I get into that, I see from Marissa, we use a chore breakdown for new residents, but now realizing that could be made into different formats to better fit the individual. Yeah, Marissa, and I think the idea that these are just beginning points, so you don't have to start from scratch. But again, if you have something, thinking about, again, what that person might need, it might be, 75% overlap, but just like some of it more individualized to the person and the actual environment that they live in. And I do think with washing hands, that idea, like, a great example that my colleague gives is like showers have different types of, is it one knob, is it two, like all those things, like until you're in someone's environment, you just don't know what they need to know. And so thinking about things like that are concrete, that might be different, just really helpful to just, again, it might just be 5 or 10% of tailoring, and the core of the steps might be the same, but just making sure that it does match the person's environment and what they need. So thanks for bringing that up, Marissa. Okay, so motivational enhancement strategies. So these are client-centered, again, around exploring ambivalence to achieve behavioral change. So it's not convincing somebody to do something, but helping somebody to understand what behaviors are serving in their lives and to help them to make changes. And it's changes they're motivated for. So again, not convincing someone to make a change, but helping somebody to work through their own ambivalence about making a change. And so I wanted to share 2 different resources. One is exploring the pros and cons of a behavior with a decisional balance matrix. And so what this is it helps somebody to break down for, let's say, for example, smoking. So if somebody is smoking, what are the pros and cons of smoking? If the behavior change is reducing or stopping smoking, what are the pros and cons of reducing smoking? And this helps somebody think about, right, all the kind of elements that it serves in their lives and the things that it's costing them, right? And then, working through that. So it's just a way to have people kind of talk through and really, visualize all together what this behavior serves in their life and maybe what it's costing them, to try to work through some of that ambivalence. Has anybody used a decisional balance before? Some people, call them pro and con lists. I like this because, again, it's pro and con of the behavior that you're sustaining, the smoking, and also of changing the behavior. So it's a matrix of 4 instead of just 2. So that's one resource to explore ambivalence. Another is exploring open-ended questions and affirmations about behavior change. And so a core element of motivational interviewing and motivational enhancement strategies are ORs, and that's open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summarizations. And the idea is that those are used to have somebody talk more about the behavior, talk more about their experience, their past experience, what it serves in their life, and to kind of help them by guiding open-ended questions to help them think about the behavior, think about, again, what is it that they like about the behavior? What is it that's harmful about the behavior? And what might be a positive thing about making a change and affirming changes that the person has made. And so this here is a guide on ORs and specifically on open-ended questions. That might be a nice resource for staff and for yourself if you're providing services. So we have a decisional map balance and open-ended questions through a guide for ORs. So those are links. Again, they're linked in this presentation. They're in the chat as well. So when you get this from Washington State, you'll be able to click on these resources if you don't save them now. Has anybody used a decisional balance or pro-cons or have staff that do? Just gonna kind of check in. Again, you can put that in the chat. So these are types of resources for helping people work through and really, if they're not even sure they're ambivalent, but you think that they are, this can help develop some ambivalence and idea of sowing seeds that people can think about positive things about new, healthier, more productive behaviors. So cognitive behavioral techniques, again, this comes from cognitive behavioral therapy. These are specific strategies focused on rehabilitation. So these are techniques and strategies to change behavior and change thoughts, specifically around unhealthy or unproductive thoughts and behaviors. So behavior modification and cognitive restructuring. So thoughts and behaviors. And two resources I wanted to highlight for this. So for cognitive restructuring, so for an unproductive thought, you can check the thought and look for healthier thoughts using the Catch It, Check It, Change It worksheet. And what this worksheet does, I'm going to share this in the chat. Again, this is cognitive restructuring. So if let's say somebody, and you can open and save and download that if you'd like. So let's say you have somebody who is going to go to an interview, but skips the interview and is like, I'm never going to get a job. There's no point going to the interview. I'm never going to get a job. And that's an unproductive, unhealthy thought, right? And that might be catastrophizing. That might be through some degree of magical thing, like whatever it is, there's something going on and the person's stress level, they have fear, whatever it is. And what you can do is think about, right, is that thought accurate, right? Are there times in which I have had a job or I do have skills, but are there times when it's been hard for me, right? So trying to make that thought more realistic based on evidence. And then thinking about what's a more productive thought. Well, it's really hard to get a job, but if I do, if I work on my resume, if I practice and maybe role play interviews, I can get more comfortable. Here are some strengths that I have, right? So saying it's like, it's hard, it's going to be challenging, but it's not impossible. And so that's a tool for somebody who does tend to have thoughts that are, basically hard for them to go through on certain behaviors, to have new behaviors or behavior change. Has anybody used cognitive restructuring? This is just one example of a worksheet that we use for training, but there's a lot of different versions of kind of catching and checking thoughts. And this is just something that's concrete. You can have the person use the worksheet. You can use this as an example, right? So you could fill it out for an example, or staff could fill it out and go through it with them. This is something that could be given for homework, where the person basically catches an unproductive thought over the course of the time between when staff is meeting with them, and then goes through and tries to. You could just work on catching unproductive thoughts or checking unproductive thoughts, which could be broken down into multiple kind of steps. But this is a wonderful skill. In all different things, it's helpful for everyone, for staff. We all have kind of unproductive, unhealthy thoughts, and there is a power to catching them. So has anybody used any type of cognitive restructuring? This is a wonderful skill, and it's really, it can be modeled really well. Oh, okay. So Erica, this is absolutely something, if somebody, let's say, is missing appointments, it's having difficulty, has these kind of catastrophizing thoughts, it is absolutely something that can be done. So this is under cognitive behavioral strategies and techniques. So, so I want you to end. Oh, wonderful. Okay, Erica, it's good that you're happy to hear it. I really did want to, because the thing is, again, there's a lot of different ways in which you can still be providing the services that you're saying that people need, but it's possible that certain thoughts or behaviors are getting kind of like stopping people. And this is a way that you can help people if, again, they're missing a lot of meetings or having difficulty doing something because of fear, anxiety, kind of overwhelming thoughts and feelings. So this is just something, again, it's not for everyone. It does require a bit of insight on the part of the person into their own thoughts and the ability to observe their own thoughts. So it's not necessarily for everyone. Or for everyone right away, but it is absolutely something that you can do. So another thing that you can do using CBT, cognitive behavioral techniques and strategies, is behavior tailoring. And this is helping to modify someone's routine or environment to support a behavior, such as taking medication. And so I have a list of behavior tailoring steps and examples specifically for taking medication. So, for example, in terms of taking medication, changing a routine might be, for example, setting an alarm to take one's medication, or setting some type of auto refill. Changing an environment might be having pills in a specific place or laid out in a specific way, or changing your environment in terms of keeping a list somewhere that helps you remember things. Some people like visual things to remind them. Some people like alarms. So it could be the physical environment. It could be one's routine of when they take something. Maybe it's easier in the morning than in the evening if they're taking pills once a day, or maybe, you know, having the pills somewhere. Oh, when I get my coffee, it's a good time to do this. So having them next to each other physically. So this is a way of thinking about modifying routines and spaces. Has anyone used behavior tailoring or not? This again, the resource I'm sharing is on medication, but it can be used in any type of behavior. So it could be about transportation. If somebody's having difficulty taking public transportation, and they're forgetting things, like they're forgetting their keys or they're forgetting something, you could have the keys hanging. I actually do this. I tailored my own environment. I have my keys hanging and attached to my wallet on the door. So I take it when I'm going, I take it off and then I put it back in. So that's modifying my own behavior because I often lose my keys in my wallet in my own apartment or forget to take them. And so that's something that it's a visual when I'm leaving the apartment. So I use some of this for that type of behavior. It can really be used for anything. And you might not be calling it behavior tailoring, but that's a way to think about it. So hopefully that's helpful. Again, that's something that can be done for any type of behavior change that somebody's looking to make to help support the environment or routine to help people to do new behaviors. Really important. So illness management and recovery. So that's a big topic, especially for people with serious and persistent mental illnesses or substance use disorders. And so illness management and recovery uses motivational enhancement, skills teaching, and CBT in order to help people to monitor their symptoms and manage and monitor symptoms by themselves. And so the recovery-based approaches that incorporates education about mental illness or medication management skills, and substance use treatment strategies. This is not exhaustive, but this is an example of what it does. And SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, wrong. I'm sorry, that was a mistake. Ignore that SAMHSA is spelled wrong. I'm going to fix that one before it's sent out. Is an IMR resource with information, handouts, and conversation guides. And so this is, there are some versions of this that agencies have specialized, but this has a number of modules. It has for people with substance use and mental illness. It has information about medication, information about recovery planning. The modules can be used, you know, in their entirety, just as handouts, which are given to people, conversation guides that you can just check, you know, some questions or activities you can do with somebody. So it's a nice guide. You don't necessarily have to do the modules with consumers, but it's really helpful. A lot of work went into it. It's hundreds of pages. It's a really good resource if you're looking for some support or your staff is on doing outreaches. So I'm going to put the toolkit. So Christina, could this also link to COVID-related illnesses? Some of the skills, absolutely, around health and safety, around, yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to think, COVID-related illnesses. The information is really about mental illness, but there are absolutely, you know, safety and monitoring. I think, Christina, I would take a look through it. You probably wouldn't give a whole module, but there is definitely information in here that could be helpful in terms of health and safety and hygiene and things like that might be helpful. So, oh, you're asking, I was talking about the SAMHSA toolkit. I'm sorry, illness management and recovery. So IMR is focused oftentimes on substance use and serious and persistent mental illness. But absolutely thinking about health and safety, you could do it. I mean, that's going to be related if somebody does have substance use disorder or a mental illness. That's going to impact, you know, related to COVID and other things. So absolutely, you know, working on skills to help people to prevent infection with COVID or to recover. Yeah. That's absolutely within the realm of these programs. So, and some of these resources that I mentioned with the toolkit might be helpful. So that's the toolkit and IMR. Okay, so now I wanted to do something before I turn things over to Francine to kind of pull things together. So thinking about making visits purposeful with FCS services. So, so how to encourage staff, yourself, staff that you supervised, to reframe visits by using FCS services, FCS service resources that I just shared. So I just shared a bunch of services that are all in the chat. To help that can be used in different situations. So I'm now going to give you 2 situations, and I want you to think about how you could use some of those resources in these situations. Okay, so to try to apply some of the things that we just talked about, or other resources that maybe I didn't talk about. So if you have a situation where someone is checking in, and this would be like the old way of writing things, that's more kind of case management, checking in on Bob after he missed a job interview, what's a way that you could provide services more in the rehabilitation model using FCS evidence-based practices or some of the resources? So instead of checking in on Bob after he missed a job interview, what's a service that could be provided that uses one of the resources that I just talked about? I'm going to give you a moment to think about that. So one of the resources, so I talked about the decisional balance matrix, open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, skills teaching. What else did I talk about? Catch it, check it, change it. For cognitive restructuring, behavior tailoring. So what's one of those resources that could be used as a service if Bob missed a job interview? Would it be helpful if I gave an example? Okay, excellent, Marissa, behavior tailoring. So how could you tailor the environment? What's an example of the way you could tailor the environment to help Bob not miss a future interview? And again, this is very little information, so you can make up some information about Bob. It's clearly not based on a situation. So what's a way that somebody could have their behavior be tailored or their environment be tailored to help support them to not miss job interviews? Right, create a calendar with scheduled times. Absolutely, thank you, Marissa. So you could do that. You could do a decisional payoff balance matrix, right? Does he actually want to get a job, right? What's the benefits of him getting a job? So kind of working through, is this that he's not actually very motivated to get a job? Does he have ambivalence about getting a job, right? You could use catch it, check it, change it. Maybe he has a thought that he's, as I mentioned, he's never gonna get a job, right? And that he's very anxious about the application process, and maybe he feels shame that he has like a gap in work history or doesn't have enough experience or skills, right? So thinking about, right, you could do that. You could do skills teaching. Maybe he missed an interview because he was supposed to take the public transportation, the bus, and he doesn't know how to take the bus. He couldn't get he couldn't get on the bus. He didn't have the right token or change, right? So it could have been lots of different things, right? So is it about, right, teaching him how to get to the interview? Is it helping him with scheduling? Is it helping him think about the motivation? It completely depends on who Bob is. We just don't have enough information. But those are some of the ways that those tools can be used, and that you can be supported, that staff can be supported to use some evidence-based tools to help. Instead of just checking in on him, right? How can you work through ambivalence? How can you work to teach him skills that he might need? And again, we don't know until we know more about Bob what those skills or ambivalences might be. Okay, I'm just gonna do one more quickly. So dropping off Mary's meds after she ran out. So what are, again, some of the skills that I talked about, or some of the resources? What is something if somebody says that she ran out of medications, instead of just dropping off the meds, right, which is again an older supportive housing way of doing things, what is a way that, what is using one of the resources, the skills teaching template, right, the catch it, check it, change it, the decisional balance that could be used to provide a service to Mary. Think about it. You can scroll back through the chat if you can't remember the tools that we talked about, but they're kind of listed there. So what is something that could be done or that staff could do to help Mary not run out of meds? Okay. Let's see. Christina used CBT, catch it, check it, change it to coordinate care and look at the situation, why she ran out, how she was feeling when she did. Right, so was it that, right, it could be a thought that she had about medication, like, oh no, this medication is like, you know, it's making me sick. Maybe she doesn't want to take the medication and has, you know, catastrophizing thoughts about the medication, right? So maybe thinking about, right, checking some of those, like, you know, about the side effects or something around the medication. So yeah, Christina, that's a great suggestion. Marissa, maybe a decisional balance. Yeah. So again, maybe she has some ambivalence about the medication. So thinking about what are the benefits of the medication, if any, and what are some of the benefits or costs to not taking the medication since she's run out, right? So thinking about working about her motivation, see how it's impacting us. It could help them see how it's impacting us as well. Yeah, can you share a little bit about that? You mean impacting you in terms of as the person working with them? Can you share a little bit about what you mean? So Francine, maybe skills teaching how to assess whether your pill box is low. Absolutely, skills teaching, right? So skills around maybe calling in a refill, you know, scheduling a meeting if you need with your psychiatrist, if you need a new prescription, right? So some of those self-managing skills. It could also be, for example, education around medication and the benefits of taking medication. Oh, okay. I like that, Marissa. So talking about kind of that, your time, your role, what services you could be provided instead of kind of dropping off meds and thinking about how you could help her and some of the benefits of that. Absolutely. So that could definitely be part of the process. I like that interpretation. Wonderful. Okay, so this is just an example. Again, we don't know a lot about Mary, but the idea is that these resources can be used in different ways. And hopefully this is a way to apply those resources for yourself, for those of you who are supervising staff who provide services. So hopefully this was helpful. And now, so these are services that could be written on an ISP and also provided by staff. Now I'm going to flip things over to Francine, who's going to talk about how do you document these services, which Medicaid is very, very, and for good reason, documenting services are really important to make sure that services are high quality, that there's communication among staff, that there's continuity over time and things are not lost. So absolutely very important. So I'm going to turn things over to Francine. Thank you so much for participating. And I do hope some of these resources are helpful to you, to staff. And I'm also, if you have more questions, please put them in the chat. I'll be monitoring that. And wonderful. Let's skip that.
So I never know about lighting. And glare with my glasses. So we'll do the best we can. So I am going to bring this training to an end by talking about the last rule on this decisional thread document, and specifically documentation, which it's very important to understand that documentation ties the services back to the plan, and it also ties it back to the assessment that was done. I believe that Shelley provided a standalone of this document, and I would recommend it might even be worth your while to print some of these off and have them by your desk, or to provide them for your staff so that they can have this as a guide as they move through all the stages, if they're utilizing all these steps, if they're the one that does it. So just as a suggestion, it's always good to have reminders of how and when you need to be doing things. So on the next slide, this is actually a screenshot of a document provided from Washington State that talks about providing documentation of medically necessary services. So keep in mind that any provider agency should create, maintain, and make sure that policies and protocols are being carried out appropriately. So this particular document talks about documentation of both the service plan and the progress notes that support any services that are being provided. And as a supervisor or managerial, for those that are supervisors or in a managerial role, you're the one that's responsible for assuring that documentation protocols are followed. So it's important for you to know how to support your staff, how to train your staff in documenting. So Medicaid reimbursement requires that all services provided are medically necessary, and they must be documented clearly and adequately. So documentation is a foundation for any coding and billing. So it's vitally important that this is being done for reimbursement. So you can provide all the other services, the assessments, the develop a plan, and all those things. And if you're not documenting it, Medicaid basically thinks it wasn't being done and you're not going to be reimbursed for it. So documentation really is vitally important. So I'm going to next be talking very briefly about documenting the service plan. And this is just a mini review. I'm talking mainly today about progress notes. But it's so important to have a well-developed service plan that actually drives and supports your progress note development. So just very briefly, the very first step in the service plan is integrating information about a person and their support system. So we're going back to assessing somebody, integrating that information. A service plan prioritizes the needs of the individual, their interest, and their rehabilitation or service goals. The third step, it manages complex needs of the individual. So the majority of the individuals we work with, the reason that we are providing services is there's a lot of complex needs possibly for that person. So a service plan actually organizes the information in a way that's manageable, and it helps to describe the interventions, and they're measurable. So bringing you back to the SMART goals that were talked about, I think, 2 trainings ago. Service plans are ongoing and connect to the assessment with targeted service delivery. So the reason I'm saying this is that documenting the service plan delivery helps drive the progress note, it supports the progress note, and the progress note also supports the service plan. So they work together collaboratively. And I think, Shelley, there's one more little bullet there. There you go. Documenting the service plan delivery supports the progress note. So I'm now going to get into more specifics about the progress note, keeping in mind that a well-developed service plan is what's going to help you when you document in your progress notes. So keep in mind and understand that as we do things routinely over and over, it's very easy to forget. It's very easy to miss details. And again, it's those details that help in billing and coding. Many claims are denied because a provider or supplier did not submit sufficient documentation to support the service being billed. So we'll talk about how do you provide sufficient documentation to make sure that all the work you're doing is going to be paid for. And it could also be denied if your progress notes fails to demonstrate a reasonable and medically necessary service. So you can go to the next little, there we go. Okay, so documenting progress. Every service delivery that you provide every encounter that you have needs to be documented. Emphasis on the progress made or not made. So you're providing intentional services that Shelley just talked about. You're documenting it. And within that documentation of the progress note, you want to make sure that you're emphasizing, was there progress made towards the goal? Or if not, why not? And we will talk a little bit more about that. A progress note describes the interventions provided and the outcomes. What was the reaction or response to the intervention? And a progress note has adequate documentation, adequate information that talks about and shows the service that you have provided. Okay, so we're on the next slide. Elements of a progress note. These are required in a progress note. The goals being addressed during the visit, and this is taken from the individualized service plan, talking about what's the goals of why you're there. And the person has developed a service plan, you've developed the goals on the service plan, and this needs to be stated in a progress note. You're also going to list or provide the interventions that you're providing during this service intervention. And again, that should come directly from the ISP. So if you have a good service plan in place, some of this information is readily accessible for you when you're doing your progress notes. Also required on a progress note are the locations of the service, Was it at the person's home? Was it at an office? Was it in the community? The duration of the service. How long did you provide the service? How long were you with the individual? And who was responsible for that intervention? So as a staff person, who they were, along with their signature that includes their title and credentials. But before that, also, you're going to develop a plan for follow-up. So you've met with somebody, you've provided an intentional service, you're writing about what that service was and the person's response to that intervention, but also included in your progress note, you want to write something about what's the next steps, what's the next intervention you may provide, what's the steps of the individual you're working with, and how they might be following up before you meet with them next. So this is a checkpoint. I'm going to ask you a question, and again, you can either unmute yourself and or put in the chat box. How do you train staff to document services? And what format do you use? So if you could, I'll give you a few moments to type in something, or if you want to unmute yourself, about how you provide the training to staff on documentation. Seeing that it's so vitally important to have good and accurate documentation and progress notes. And you might even have some suggestions that will be useful to all of us about what about somebody who's struggling with providing intentional services and or writing progress notes. Is there any tips or strategies that you find beneficial when training staff? Okay, so the DAP plan, I see one, who was it? Shelley, thank you. The DAP plan, the data assessment and planning format. Anybody use that? Thank you, Shelley, for suggesting that. Okay. So how about if you go to the next slide, and please feel free to continue any suggestions or strategies that are helpful. No matter what kind of progress note format that's utilized, that it is a skill that needs to be developed, particularly for new staff, to be supported in what do all these things mean? What are all these buzzwords that we use sometimes to provide services for people? And how do you capture that in a progress note so that it's sufficient enough to get to bill and get funded for? So here's an example of a progress note format. It's not the DAP plan, but it is the format that's provided in that document that was shown earlier that had the screenshot of documentation for the state of Washington. So the format that they've suggested is providing the goal, which could also be incorporated in the DAP plan. Where would you put the goal? And it corresponds to the goal from the treatment plan. So again, we're going back to the treatment plan, identifying what the plan is for the individual. The intervention, again, goes back to the service plan. Interventions are directly directed by the goals and the objectives, and interventions that are include activities or support provided towards the goal. Let me say that again, because I think I mumbled myself. So the interventions, again, are taken from the service plan, and they include activities or support provided towards the goals or objectives. So what interventions are you providing to assist that person in achieving their goals or objectives? And again, the location needs to be included. And very importantly, the response to the intervention. And this is where you're going to describe the results of what happened, what took place, what you did, what was the response? Did it move the person towards their goal? Were there barriers that interfered with any goal progress for the individual? And if so, explaining what those barriers were. And also, you're going to describe how the symptoms or functional limitations, because this needs to be medically necessary, affect the intervention or progress toward the goals of the objectives. So that section is going to probably be the most extensive as far as writing goes. What took place? What was the response? Was there movement towards the goal? And then, of course, your signature and your title with your credentials need to be included. So what I'd like to do for an example is, here's a scenario, and hopefully some of you will help in developing what might be included in a progress note for Elaine, who is a 25-year-old female who's been diagnosed with anxiety and depression since high school. Elaine has lived with her parents, who she is close with. She's lived there her whole life, but she would like to try living on her own. She decided that she wanted, that she would like to live close to where her parents are. She states that she's ready and looking forward to her new independence, but finds this process daunting, and her symptoms of depression have increased due to the stress. So she wants to live alone. She's living with her parents. She'd like to live close to her parents. And she is experiencing some depression and anxiety, thinking about having to take the steps to become independent in her living. So Elaine, this had additional objectives in interventions, but for the sake of being able to see it on the PowerPoint and to discuss it and how a progress note would be developed, I've included just one objective and one intervention. So Elaine's ISP states that in the next 3 months, she wants to find an apartment within walking distance of her parents' home while learning ways to manage symptoms of her depression and anxiety. So one of Elaine's barriers is coping with stress, which interferes with her being motivated and completing tasks in a timely manner. So you can see how this might interfere with her ability to move forward in living independently and finding a place to live. So one objective for Elaine is within 2 months, Elaine will create a list of available housing that are and a step-by-step instruction guide for herself about the information she's going to need. So she's going to find a list of houses that are close to where she lives, where her parents live, and she's also going to make a list of what she's going to need to be able to fill out those housing applications. And so as a staff person, I'm going to meet with her on a daily basis to assist her with reviewing available housing options in the community and to assist her and review the information list that she has developed for herself. So this is the ISP. So before we go on to the next slide, which gives an example of a progress note that might be available, I'd like to ask you, what are some of the things that need to be listed on the progress note? How are you going to develop a progress note for Elaine, taking this information that's provided on her ISP? I'm going to be working with her to help find a place to live. So Jessica says, isn't it my job to assist her with available housing lists? Yes. I would say depending on the individual, that if she needs assistance with that, if she's more independent in finding them. But so one of the things that you can do as a provider is your intervention would be to help her with the available housing list. Thank you for bringing that up. So I'm going to go to the next slide. And I think it would be easier under the circumstances that we'll look at this progress note that was developed, and you can provide any suggestions of whether or not this would be sufficient, whether or not it's missing something, and whether or not it includes all the things that are needed in a progress note to be able to bill for. So again, her goal, which was taken from the service plan, is to find an apartment within walking distance of her parents. I'm going to meet with Elaine for 45 minutes to assist her with the housing options and to compile a list of the documentation required for housing. I'm doing this in the community with her. In her response, this is a very important piece that kind of summarizes everything that needs to be for billing purposes. So the individual states that she has difficulty managing symptoms of her depression and anxiety, especially the stress caused by thinking about how to determine what housing options are available to her and how to go about applying. So her symptoms are becoming a little bit more severe with the pressure of looking for vacancies. So with assistance, she'll be able to create a list of available housing units, which are within 15 minutes of walking distance. In addition, I've assisted her with, collaborated with her. So we're working together. It's an individualized plan to create a step-by-step instruction guide that will provide the information that's significant to her being able to apply for housing. And she reports that after meeting together, that her symptoms have significantly reduced surrounding the housing search. And then the future plan is to meet with her again tomorrow to review the information and documentation needed, as well as to apply to one of the apartment complexes. So we've included in here what took place, what Elaine's response was, that there was some movement forward and that her anxiety diminished, and we have a future plan. So if anybody would like to make some comments, what do you think is missing from this plan? Do you think it's sufficient, enough information to for Medicaid to bill for, or to bill Medicaid and get reimbursed? Hey, Shelley. I'll ignore that. Progress notes. Sufficient? Ah, my credentials. What else? It has the time in there, how long I met with her, where I met with her. If you worked for Medicaid, would you reimburse for this service based on Elaine's service plan? All right, how about if we move on to the next slide, which is also very important when talking about errors. So the first little bullet here is, when focusing on charting, we're liable even when errors are unintentional. So it's very important to remember when documenting that you want to be very careful about errors that are included. And if Medicaid audits the notes, they could potentially decide to take money back if there are errors. The next bullet is review the time and date of services to make sure that they're accurate in there. One of the things I think that happens sometimes is time-wise, we're putting in 2 a.m. We worked with somebody at 2 a.m. in the morning when it was really 2 p.m. I know that there's some ways of catching that depending on the system that your agency uses, but it can be easy to sometimes put in wrong dates and or wrong times. So watch for those errors. Ensure that service date, service type, duration, staff information, and location are included. Again, that would be considered an error, and you want to be cautious about that so that money is paid for services you're providing and not taken away if they find that the documentation was in error. Even if it's not, intentionally done, they're going to be looking for specific things. Ensure that the intervention reflects the appropriate identified goal. Again, the golden thread. Everything ties back through that whole process, and the goal on the service plan needs to be identified on the progress note. And remember, the errors can open agencies to increase scrutiny, more oversight, or repayment. So identifying errors, watching out for errors, discussing with those you supervise how errors really can impact a program in an agency. So further considerations. Besides errors, there's some other things that you may want to consider. First of all, providers are liable for the errors, even when they're unintentional. Review the time, date, and service of the errors. I think these ensure that the service date and time, duration, and staff information locations are included. And I think this is kind of a repetition of what I said. I apologize for that. Double slide. So let's go to amending a record. Sometimes, and Medicaid realizes that sometimes records need to be amended. So if you review and find errors or missing information in a progress note, you can amend them, but you want to follow these steps. So you're going to clearly and permanently identify the amendment, correction, or delayed entry. So you're going to clearly identify it. This is an amendment, and you're going to provide the correction, or if it was a delayed entry. You're going to clearly indicate the date and the person who's doing the amendment, the correction, or the delayed entry. So whoever is doing the amendment needs to identify themselves. And the third step, vitally important, do not delete the original, but clearly identify all original content. So you can make amendments, but you don't want to delete what was in there before. You want to clearly express that it is an amendment, and the person who provided the amendment will clearly identify themselves. So this is another check-in point with some questions for you. Appreciate some chats. And how do you monitor staff progress notes? Do you have an auditing process in your organization or in your program? And what specific information do you look for? So now you have staff, they've written progress notes, you're checking some of your notes, possibly if you do that, or if your organization does that. What is it that you look for? It's kind of an internal audit, before Medicaid does their audit. Do you audit progress notes for your staff, or does somebody else in the agency do that? Okay, so no monitoring. That's Marissa. Thank you. Nothing in place at this point for monitoring. Anybody else? Anybody does monitor or check progress notes, reviews them? So please feel free to continue to type in something, but I'm going to go to the next slide, which along with this, okay, so before we go to the next one too, Shelley does say, do any of your agencies have quality assurance staff? And I'm sure they're very concerned about making sure that progress notes and documentations are done to the best quality. Any quality assurance staff? So while you're typing that in, I'm going to discuss briefly this next slide that comes with a Word document that Shelley just put in the chat box that looks a little bit different than this, but I wanted to have be a little bit more visual. So this is a progress note checklist. And it follows the same format of the example that was utilized a little bit earlier. And it has 16 identified checkpoints for you to look at when you're reviewing charts, either your own charts or for individuals that you're supervising. So the Word document can easily be reformatted or changed, added to, and deleted things that maybe aren't relevant, but it has different things that you can check if you're going through a chart. You can look at, is the goal included? Is the location indicated? The intervention from the service plan? Did you include the response to the intervention? The results of the intervention? Did it make progress towards the objectives of the individual? Or if not, describing why not? What was the barrier that took place? And Shelley, I don't know if you have it easily accessible, but seeing that at least one individual did say they used the DAP plan, maybe that checklist that is also available, or we can send it out with the PowerPoint, a checklist also that's specifically put together for those that utilize the DAP format for progress notes. So I'm going to go through some of the additional checks at the bottom of this document. Are the next service delivery dates dated and timed? Is there a note dated and signed? Are things legible? Is the person's name and note notes on the notes spelled correctly? Is it in a strengths format? Appropriate abbreviations. There's some abbreviations that are acceptable when writing notes and some that should not be used. Is there enough information to justify billing? And would somebody that's not familiar with the person who the progress note is about, would they be able to read the note and understand exactly what occurred and what took place and what was the response to the service? So that's a checklist that's both in Word format, and I see that Shelley did include the DAP checklist if you use that format. And it's a good habit to get into, particularly if you're a supervisor or managerial, to once in a while pull a chart, check some notes to make sure that progress notes are being identified or written appropriately.
Yeah, and in addition to it being an auditing tool for managers, supervisors, it can also be a tool for staff to be trained on to check their own notes. So they can audit their own notes every 5, 10, whatever random number of notes, 1 note a week, just to get in the habit. If you're working with staff, as Francine mentioned, maybe who are struggling with notes, this might be something that can be offered so that staff can build their skills, because, you know, working in behavioral health, progress notes are so important that, you know, that's like a skill for them to build. And so kind of getting them on board and trying to enhance notes, they can kind of audit their own.
So this kind of brings us to the end of my section on documentation. So if there's any questions, or please feel free to ask, or comments, clarifications about progress notes, please put them in the chat box. Otherwise, that brings us to the evaluation section that I believe Shelley will be putting a link in there. Please fill out the evaluation. We always appreciate it. Okay, so Marissa learned that we need to tighten up our notes. Okay, good. I'm glad, because it is very important, particularly if and when you get audited.
Wonderful. So this is the end of the 3 series of trainings. So we're happy to answer if there's a resource that you have a question about, something we shared today, something we shared at any of the 3 trainings. Last week on goal development, knowledge, skills, and resources, the first week on assessments. We're happy to answer anything. And it is very helpful for us to have evaluation. If there's some of the resources that you found particularly helpful, we added more resources this time. So there's any resource you're like, oh, this is great, I want to try this, or something that you feel was missing or would be more helpful. We didn't do breakout groups today, or really at all. Would having more time to talk with each other be helpful? So just like getting a sense of like what you liked, what maybe you think would be helpful. And breakout groups are the most divisive thing that we do, because some people love them, some people don't. So it's good to have that feedback. So we really appreciate you taking any time to fill that out. So thank you so much. And any other questions about any of the resources, if you're looking for something different, that would also be great. Again, this is being recorded. It'll be sent out by, I believe, Kimberly Castle from the Washington State Healthcare Authority very soon. Anything that has a link in here, you can click to. So everything we shared should be clickable within this. So yeah. Wonderful. Thanks, Marissa. Thank you so much for participating. I'm actually going to stop the training, the recording now, but we're happy to answer any questions. We are about 10 minutes early in terms of ending, which is, good. Everyone's very busy, but hopefully you still got information and it was helpful. But thank you so much again. We really appreciate your participation and coming to these trainings. So thank you so much.
Thank you.